All right, we are here with City Council at-large candidate Steve Angelo. Steve, really appreciate you joining us
Oh,
today.
thanks for having me, Tim. I really appreciate having me.
Absolutely, for our country kitchen fireside chats. um, in terms of just for the folks that may not know you, may not have even been paying attention to the campaign till now, can you kind of give the 2 minute in terms of who you are and why you're running?
Sure. So once again, my name's Steve Angelo. I'm a candidate for City Council At-Large here in Methuen for this upcoming election in November. I chose to run because I think we want to bring a positive view back to the City Council, and I believe that we need people who have outside the box type of thinking, which will help to move Methuen in a good direction. I come from experience. I have a master's education from Endicott College. I also worked in higher education for several years before taking my position at the town of Stoneham as the director of recreation. So as a candidate, I actually bring in-depth knowledge and experience with municipal government, which I think is something very special for the residents to be able to get, because I know the ins and outs and I know the difference between what's right and wrong in a municipal government standpoint. And there's been a lot of talk about a lot of different issues. And I think that experience and a positive attitude, bringing that to the city council, will really help us to move forward.
The whole idea, like, there's change is good, and there's been obviously a call from the voters during this election. They want change. They want the climate to change, but experience isn't necessarily a bad thing, right?
In terms of political experience,
Yeah,
no, I don't think it's a bad thing.
or
But,
just government experience.
but government experience, I think, is essential for knowing how to go about getting things done within a municipal government. I can speak for myself that last week I was at the State House and I was working on workshops to bring in over $100,000 in grant money back to my community. And having those relationships at the state level and having the relationship to the municipal level and drawing those people together, I think is a very, very important thing in terms of putting Methuen above other communities, in terms of having the wherewithal to be able to make those connections to bring money back to the city.
You're from Methuen.
Born and raised in Methuen, yeah.
Why'd you stay? Why'd you stay? Why'd you come back? Why'd you decide to officially plant roots here as an adult?
Yeah, so I love Methuen, and as I will always say, that I think there is unbelievable potential within the city. The history that we have in the city with the Searles Castle and with the great youth organizations that we have in the stadium and the new turf. And I've seen the community come together so many times to do some great things. And I think that we need to make sure we are working together to reach all the potential that we do have.
It's been a sticking point for a lot of voters, a lot of folks. I mean, as much as all of the issues have, for lack of a better term, sucked in terms of all the issues we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
It has caused folks to pay more attention than they used to. It's caused folks to watch city council meetings more than they ever did. And part of what people have seen in the middle of all that is a lot of contentiousness, a lot of not working together for the common good.
Yep.
And whether that be between the mayor and the council, or even the council within the council. Where do you stand on that, and how would you be different?
So that's a great question. It's actually a huge reason why I'm running for office. Is over the past few years, we've seen a lot of animosity at the city council table. And not every single councilor is going to agree on every single subject. But we actually have to be able to work together, for the common good of the city. It's not our own personal agendas, our own personal viewpoints that are important. It's in residents, in what's best for them, which is important. That's supposed to be our role as city councilor. And I chose to live here because I want to be part of that change. And that's why I stepped up. I've never run for political office before. Never thought I'd be running for political office. But I thought now, with everything that's going on in the city, we need people with a positive outlook who have experience, who can step up and point us and steer us towards a good direction for the city.
The part of what has frustrated folks is they see a lot of, again, for lack of better terms, camps. They see a lot of alliances, like predetermined in terms of the politics of the city. How how will you address that if you're elected?
Oh,
How
and
how will you serve?
sure, and I've been very steady point in my stance that I am trying to run as independent as a campaign as possible. I said I'm running on behalf of myself and on the residents, and I hate to see. I think that block voting and the idea of alliances is very unhealthy for a city because we need to go into it with objective views on every single subject, and going in with alliances and predetermined ways that we were voting isn't going to help the residents of the city. And I've been very, very adamant that I said I will go in there as objective on every single vote and just look out for what's in the best interest of the residents.
Been a lot of talk about the term conflicts of interest in this campaign, and um, when you've been a lifelong resident, um, it's people will associate you with that more than the newcomer.
Yep.
How do you, in terms of the relationships that you've the friendships, the relationships you've built throughout your years in Methuen, how how is that a positive in what you bring to the council, and how will you be able to compartmentalize that in
Yep.
making the right decisions for the common good?
So obviously, conflict of interest is one of the main topics that people bring up. I said throughout this entire election season, and myself personally, I have no conflicts within the city. I have no family members who work for the city. I have no aunts, no uncles, no one who's been involved with the city. So I would be able to vote on almost every single vote at the council table, including the budgets. So obviously, a lot of the people who are running in a lot of the races have personal connections with people within the community. That's natural. It's how you handle yourself during those conversations and during those votes is what's most important. I said you need to be able to differentiate your personal relationships and what's best, and basically be able to determine what's right and what's wrong. And as long as you're able to do that, I think that it's completely fine to have friends on different areas. But you need to make sure that you are doing everything in the best interest of the residents and not for personal agendas.
Absolutely. Other than being, when you talked about being motivated by frustration with the culture, now that you're a candidate, now that you've pulled papers, you've gotten the signatures, you've done the meet and greets, um, we're almost at the finish line here in terms of the election, just the start of the governing.
Yeah.
But um, how do you, what are the issues that are most important to you, um, other than that um, that culture issue,
Okay.
yeah, the working together for the common good. Other than those
Yep.
issues, what are the issues within the city that you really want to champion when you're on council?
So I think one of the major issues that the city is experiencing right now is we have a lot of infrastructure issues that we need to address. And we have a lot of great facilities within the city, but we've also been negligent with some of them as well. We have a fire station in the central, which can't fit fire trucks. So we have a DPW building, which is on the verge of being condemned basically at this point in time. So we have a police station, which is extremely outdated. I think that we really need to start to look into some long-term planning in terms of putting together facilities which will help to serve the community at a better spot. I also think that all the underground utilities and all the underground infrastructure, which has not been addressed in several years, should be a main priority. I said it is something that impacts every single person who lives within the city, and if we don't start to address it, it could become a very serious issue that will impact the lives of thousands and thousands of people and the quality of life that we have here within the city. In order to do that, I think that we really need to start to look at our tax base that we have within the city and where we're getting our money from. There's no concept that we've had a lot of residential building within the last 5 years. I said everyone's seen it. They've seen the traffic increases. They've seen the impact it's had on the schools and on the services within the city. I think that we need to concentrate on bringing in more commercial tax bases and trying to encourage businesses to come here within the city. So we're not putting the burden of the taxes on the residents, that where it's a shared 75-25 split, which any healthy community should have, and to really work together to encourage these businesses to want to be part of Methuen long term.
The and a lot of the frustration with that residential development is doesn't feel like there's been um, a, a partnership in terms of with those developments in um, addressing infrastructure issues that will be created
Right.
by adding these
Yep.
developments. And so how I think when people talk about the infrastructure issues that we're having, especially when you talk to politicians and how they want to address them in the past, there's a lot of nervousness and even in bringing up taxes
Yep.
and increasing tax. Like how do, everybody says they want to do this, that, or the other thing in terms of improve our sewer system, improve our DPW, and
Mm-hmm.
give our DPW an actual facility. How do you do these things in improving? I mean, the streets,
Yep.
the paving in the streets. Um, how do you do all these things without or not and not necessarily I don't believe taxes
Yep.
is a swear word.
Yeah.
But how do you do this in a situation right now where we don't have a lot of um, funds in reserve
Right.
right now?
Yep. And I think that you need to be strategic what you do with your Chapter 90 money that comes into the state. I said, especially as long as you have long-term planning, and I'll keep going back to it. I've gone back to it in several debates. Is when you plan ahead, the issues become less of an issue that you've been planning accordingly along the way. We're knowing that okay, we're having this development going in. We're planning 5 years ahead that we need to address this before it becomes an issue. That's where it helps. I think that through state funding. I also think through mitigation. I'm not sure that we've been doing enough with mitigation with these developments to have them say, okay, if you want to build here, you need to do this for the city as well to make sure it's not attacked on the residents surrounding those areas, which is something that I see within my community quite a bit, where it's like, okay, through that, if we're going to inconvenience these people, we need to make sure that we're bringing in resources for them as well to improve the quality of life in that area.
How is your experience in your professional life? Um, how does that translate in terms of what you can bring to the council?
So I think it translates usually because I have a lot of connections within the state house and within different communities to build bridges to help to move Methuen forward. I say it's a team effort within Methuen, but it's also a team effort between Methuen and the state. And having those conversations to help to put ourselves in a good situation in terms of acquiring grants and acquiring money through the state. I also think that I've developed my own budget and know the inner workings of the budgeting process in municipal areas where when we come to budget season, I actually have a professional experience view at every single line item in how it pertains to each department and what is right and what's wrong and how we can make sure that we're spending our tax dollars appropriately throughout the city.
So your feeling is that there's a lot more grant money out there to be had and not to belittle
Correct.
anyone in terms of the past, but
Yep.
just in your professional experience, you feel like there's a lot more grant money that we could be in line for that
Correct.
we just haven't
Yep.
gone after.
And I think there's endless amounts of grants out there, to be honest with you. I said, and this is money that the Methuen taxpayers have already given to the state. I said, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we're chasing every single grant dollar that we can to bring it back to Methuen so it doesn't go to other communities. I can speak on the recreational side where Methuen's eligible for almost $500,000 a year in recreational grants. And once we put long-term strategic plans in place, we can utilize those grants to help to offset the costs of those long-term plans. But until I think we really start to take a long-term look at things, as opposed to just trying to band-aid things with grant money here and here, we need to be strategic in how we go after these grants. And as I said, it is endless. There's millions and millions of dollars that we can bring into the city each year. And having that vision within City Hall to chase after that money is extremely important because we have a lot of needs here in the city. And unfortunately, the city isn't a financial place where we can do that ourselves. So we need to find outside avenues to be able to bring that money in to help move Methuen forward.
So when we talk about commercial development, one of the issues that you guys that the next council is going to have to deal with that they have not dealt with. It's kind of kicked it down the road a little bit. while other cities have truly, addressed it one way or the other, is marijuana. And whether that be medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, um, where do you stand on the issue, and um, how does that stance impact how you'll look at
Correct.
this issue
Yep.
as a member of the council?
I said, and that's a hot button topic for everyone. I said, you get that conversation quite a bit. I am not a supporter of recreational marijuana and pot shops within the city. That's not something I think that Methuen should be looking at. But I think that we are naive and we're being negligent not to be looking into doing different growth facilities or different avenues that can bring in tax money to the city without having a drastic impact. And then there'll have to be a lot of studies done. We'll have to do a lot of research before we even start to look into considering it. But I don't want to be that city 15 years down the road to say, hey, we missed the bus. We need to bring as much tax money in as possible, and to just totally turn a blind eye to the opportunity, I think isn't in the best interest of the city and the residents at this point in time.
Do you feel like we've missed the boat so far in terms of us not having dealt with it yet?
No, because I don't think that we are out of the game, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I said we need to start to look at it, though.
Yeah.
I don't think that we can turn a blind eye to something that has become such a prominent thing within the community. And regardless of what your personal opinions are, I think that as a council, we need to take a neutral look at it to see whether or not the income that comes in for it is worth the, not to say risk is probably a bad word, but it's in terms of the impact they would have on the community. And we need to come to a decision as a council of 9 people to say, this is where we should go because it would help to offset this, or we shouldn't do this because it's not right for our community. But to not have the conversation at all, and I'm happy to see that the conversation is somewhat being had at this point in time, I think that the conversation has to continue, and then we can decide from there.
How so one thing that I've heard from a lot of folks, whether it be folks that were thinking of starting businesses or folks that started businesses and looked elsewhere other than Methuen, is there's this overall sense that we're not friendly in terms of attracting business and attracting specifically small businesses and supporting small businesses. How do we address that mentality or that perception in changing the reality and in attracting new business to the city?
Correct. And that goes towards our commercial tax base and the tax rate that we have on the commercial end within the city. And unfortunately, we make it very difficult for small mom and pops to really flourish because of the tax rates that we have. I said that's the reason why you see a lot of chain restaurants within Methuen, which I'm not saying anything bad against chain restaurants. There's plenty of good ones out there. But I think that we are almost putting ourselves into an area where those are the only people who could afford to do business here at this point in time. We need to come up with some strategic plans to give tax credits to these mom and pops to help them build and thrive within the community, with a commitment on them to say that they are willing to have their business within the community for a long period of time. We can't just be giving tax breaks out to everybody. But I think that with people who are committed to being part of our community, I said it might be worthwhile to look into having different credits to go towards them flourishing and bringing their business here as opposed to going to Haverhill or Salem, New Hampshire, or Lawrence. We need to build that commercial base here, and whatever we can do as a council and as City Hall to encourage that is needed right now.
I don't know what building it would have been. For instance, I look at Amazon going to North Andover, and they obviously had some buildings that were available. Again, I don't know if we had those buildings that we could have offered for a distribution hub, but I was frustrated to just and a lot of folks when I would bring this up to them were kind of like, really, like that we might have even had a shot at that.
Yeah.
I was frustrated to really not even like hear that we were in the running or that we'd had any initial conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the New Balance
Correct.
deal on the west side. That's a great thing for the city, but like, how do we attract that balance of bigger business, of smaller business, of protecting the businesses that we have, like the Loop.
Yep.
You know,
And I think that's working with your property owners within the city to help them to generate those relationships. Once again, we have a community development office here within the city who can help to bring those businesses in to start that conversation from happening. Obviously, the Loop's our biggest tax contributor here within the city, and we need to do ourselves to protect from empty storefronts, I said, because once that starts to close down, that's a very, very bad thing for our city, especially with all the Tuscan Village and stuff going on in Lawrence. We need to really work strategically with our community development office to attract these businesses and to work with the property owners to help them. Once we don't necessarily have them knocking down our door to come to Methuen to say, hey, we want to start business here. But it doesn't mean that they won't. Initiating that conversation with them and bring them in and showing all the great resources we have here within the city, whether it be the location or whether it be the infrastructure that we do have, which is in good shape. I think that that is what we need to start to do a little bit more of to attract these businesses and let them know that we're here.
I mean, it's scary to see the increasing number of empty storefronts happening,
Yep.
but at the same time, it creates an opportunity,
Yep.
and it creates a chance of um, rebranding ourselves to the business community,
Right.
so to speak. And you mentioned it in terms of, I mean, how how will you, as one voice on the council, really push to put those systems in place for long-term planning? Because we've seen inklings of it, and that we need it, but we still don't have
Correct.
the kind of long-term plans that we should have had 15 years ago, in my opinion, to
Correct.
to combat where we are right now.
And I think that starts with the relationship with the mayor's office. As a council and as an individual councilors, you need to be able to have that conversation with the mayor's office to make sure within City Hall that they have that as a priority within all the city departments, is to say, this is where we need to go with this. This is what our vision is. And I think that we might have lost vision over time, which puts us in a situation that we are in now. Doesn't mean we can't change that. And I think that with the council and the mayor's office working in unison with each other, with having that same vision of we need to look long term, we need to get some positive changes in the city, I think that it could happen. And I think it really starts with that relationship with that office and then that vision from that office throughout City Hall to have everyone on the same page and to really work together to keep moving us forward.
It's not by by uh, by plan that we haven't brought up the police contract yet.
Yeah.
It's obviously a huge issue
Yep.
with voters. Um, Without trying to rewrite history in terms of addressing it all, because I think you've all addressed it plenty along the way. Again, for those who may have not been paying attention
Yep.
so far, um, where do you stand in terms of addressing the situation where it's at right now?
Obviously, we're in arbitration at this point in time, and myself personally, I wish we'd gone to arbitration a little bit earlier in this process, because keeping it within the city, I think, has been holding us back from actually coming to a solution within the problem. I think once arbitration comes back, either way, we need to make sure that we have our unions and our mayor's office working in good faith with each other for what's best for the residents, and making sure that we put ourselves in a situation where we can afford to pay for these officers. I am a very big supporter of the police. I think that we need as many police officers on the street as possible for the betterment of our community. We also need to make sure that we can afford to pay the bill. And I really hope that we also have to work in good faith that we do what's best for the city.
Outside of outside of a culture that law enforcement is fighting in general, um, in nationally, in some ways earned, in some ways not earned, um, in how they deal with the community. I think one thing that we've all seen from our police here in Methuen is a really proactive approach in dealing with the community, and forging relationships with the community. So I haven't like I I like everyone feels like they have to preface the conversation with I love the police. I'm not
Yep.
against the police. I haven't heard one person
No,
who says I hate the police.
correct. No, should you?
Yeah,
So,
you shouldn't. Yeah, I mean
but
because they've earned a reputation here in
correct.
the city as being really proactive on
And
so many fronts.
and they absolutely are. And the best thing that we do within our department, and I give the chief a lot of credit for this, is community engagement's been a huge resource for them. They've been involved. They're down at I said, down in Tenny Street Park. I said, they are down at trunk or treats. They are engaged to show that they're humans and they want what's best for the community as well. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff's put them in bad lights and put them in tough situations. But it doesn't mean that they don't care about the community. And that's why I think a lot of people preface it by saying, hey, I support the police. Because we do and we need to. I said they're a vital part of our community and people who have been engaged and really care about us. And it's just an unfortunate situation that we're in that hopefully we can work through and show them, you know what, they are good people and we need them.
One